We're here with Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican. Busy agenda for the lame duck. What's top of the list?
Well, first of all, we have to continue with the operation of government, which means the continuing resolution we've got that expires first week in December will have to be extended. Our goal is to finish the appropriations process and get that out. It's about 25% of the operation of government, and we hope to have it done for the entire year.
But the wall might throw a wrench in this.
It could. Hopefully it will not. The wall, DACA, and so forth have still been related. What we tried last year in February, Senator King and myself actually had a bill that had 54 votes on the floor that would have provided $25 billion for the operation of the border security system, north and south, and also would have resolved the DACA issues. In the meantime, we've got a farm bill which has to get fixed, and so that's really going to be for us the priority.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, is because in particular, states like yours, for example, Senator, are a bit nervous in terms of how the U.S.-China trade talks are going. They want to see potentially more money from the agricultural, from USDA to agriculture states. Is that potential provisions going to be wrapped up in the farm bill negotiations?
Actually, what we really want is free trade once again, because look, they're not looking for a handout in our part of the country. There were some provisions that will pick up some of the cost, but just as an example, we are now 5 years in with net farm income down 50% from what it was. But soybeans are a critical part of this discussion. China actually buys right at about 25 to 30% of the entire soybean crop. It's about 60% of all of our exports are soybeans to China. And so when you start talking, or about 60% of all the soybeans we have get exported to China. So right now, every time you have a 10-cent drop in a price of a bushel of soybeans, it means really close to about a $24 million loss to producers in my state, South Dakota.
I want to stick with soybeans for a second.
Yeah.
Are you nervous that China's shifting and looking elsewhere to buy soybeans?
They have to shift to do something because they need soybeans, but they're going to pay a higher price because the soybeans at other locations are more expensive. The cost of getting them into China is more expensive. The quality in many cases is not what China wants. They'd prefer to buy from us, but at the same time, the president is saying you have to understand that the bigger issue is China is stealing from us. They're taking our intellectual properties.
Right.
So this is something that we'd love to have it resolved last week, or next week, or the following week. But we've got to get some kind of an agreement with China. Hopefully, as the president and President
Xi Jinping. That's what I was just going to ask you. Is in Buenos Aires? I mean, they're going to meet. What's the issue number one you want the president to ask them about?
Well, what we want them to do is look at each other and say, look, we know this has got to be resolved at some point. But China has to recognize that they cannot be stealing the intellectual property of the United States. And once that happens and he recognizes that they have to make changes faster than what they're already trying to do, then I think the president has the ability to say, all right, you put this down, let's make some agreements to get this thing started, and then we'll start pulling back our tariffs. Our expectation is that China would be more than willing to start buying our soybeans again.
Senator, I want to cut through the noise here because there's so much chatter in Washington about all of the different, Democrats taking control of the House, divided government and whatnot. But this impacts policy, particularly on USMCA, Nafta 2.0. Democrats in the House have essentially said that USMCA being renegotiated, that the USMCA will not be ratified unless there are changes made. There are a lot of folks, your state in particular, that are going to be impacted by Nafta 2.0. Is Nafta 2.0 going to be ratified despite divided government?
Well, in the Senate, I think it would be. In the House, it remains to be seen.
So that's one of the risks that we take.
Most certainly it is. That's not good for the farm economy, but I can tell you that if they sign the agreement, which the expectation is that this new agreement will be signed on the 30th of September or 30th of November, somewhere in that neighborhood, that the next step will be to try to put the hard push on to get a lot of these folks to realize that there's a lot of good in this new program. And while it's not perfect, it's still better than what we had before, and it's a win for American producers.
You have a busy day today. You just came from a hearing with Fed Vice Chairman for
that was 2 meetings ago.
That was 2 meetings with Randy Quarles. What did you hear from Mr. Quarles that you liked? What do you want to see him do differently?
Well, he recognizes, particularly for South Dakota and the upper Midwest, that we've got ag producers that are going to be coming in borrowing money after 5 years of losses. And what I heard from him was saying, we understand that those banks that have been ag banks for years and years and they have the expertise, our folks are going to be understanding with the fact that some of these folks are going to come in and they're not going to have as many assets to borrow against as they did 5 years ago. And that there's going to have to be an understanding that this is a national trend. This is not something that's because of operator error. And I think the fact that those banks would not, or at least it appears as though they're going to be understanding to the banks who extend money to those producers that they've got relationships with is going to be easier to do, and that they're not going to be just marking them off as non-performing assets.